Well, can you imagine a unique treasure of Taiji soulstone coveted by thousands of immortals and gods, and a whole generation of Taoist people created just to execute Zhang Daoling and his beloved? For Daoling, who is our protagonist, it's quite possible. As a result, he killed all the immortals and gods and then reincarnated in a world of magic and swords thanks to the soulstone. You see, Daoling's story begins quite far back, in a battle, listening to a two golden gods say that his hour of life had come to an end, so he had to give up the supreme soulstone so that they could spare his life. Daoling, lying on the ground surrounded by rubble thanks to the battle, laughed at the golden god, questioning what he had said, letting him know that the group who wanted the soulstone were all unworthy of having it, and that they were all villains who only knew how to stab people in the back. He let them all know that the stone, which had the mark on his forehead, was a precious gift that his master had given him, as well as being a tool that was too important to help him become a god, so if they wanted him to give it to them, they could all wait. With that clarified, Daoling exploded a source of his power quite large, causing the immortals to be scared. Daoling expressed that even though they weren't as good as they were, he would have gladly given the stone to the person destined for it with his own hands. But unfortunately for them, they all dared to set a trap with the name of his beloved, Xianger, to ambush him. As he spoke, the source of power he had exploded turned into fire. Some immortals shouted that he was crazy for burning his body and his own primordial spirit just to protect the stone, while others were happy to have led him to a dead end and ordered that he be caught fast enough not to let him escape. They apparently threw some magical ties onto Daoling's body, making him surprised, since if they could catch him until his primordial spirit ran out, the Supreme Soulstone would be theirs. Daoling, laughing, began whispering to his master that he feared he wouldn't return, but if he made that group of infringing bastards die, it wouldn't be a disgrace for him. With that said, he released his spell of infernal imprisonment. The immortals, scared, made it known that Daoling had opened the way to the underworld. They warned that under no circumstances should they let Daoling's soul get trapped there, otherwise they would lose the stone and never be able to recover it. As they tried to reach where Daoling was, they began to be sucked into the underworld, and started shouting that if he didn't close the gates of the underworld, he wouldn't be able to escape either. Our protagonist made it very clear that he didn't care if he didn't live, as long as he could kill them all, he could die in peace. Additionally, he let them know that he was the great Zhang Daoling and that he had lived without restrictions, so he didn't understand how he could feel afraid of the words coming out of his mouth. Some immortals already quite close to Daoling shouted for help, as they didn't want to die, but their companions couldn't do anything for them. Meanwhile, Daoling was remembering his beloved Xianger, thinking that if she had really asked him to go that time, it would have been quite cool and everything would have been different, but unfortunately for him, it wasn't. Accepting that he was going to die, he let himself be carried on the path of the underworld, but when he was almost there, Xianger's voice appeared, which made our protagonist open his eyes to look for her, thinking it was a miracle that she was there. As soon as he saw her, he wished he hadn't, as he remembered where he was. Xianger threw another soul stone at him, apparently. Daoling, reaching out to grab it, asked her if she had really used her primordial spirit to force the soul stone to bloom. When he caught what Xianger had thrown him, a wave of power spread, expanding everywhere. Xianger was congratulating herself on having arrived in time when Daoling asked her to turn around and escape. She accused him of being foolish, as he couldn't just walk the path of the underworld without the help of the soul stone, or his true essence would scatter. She let him know that it wouldn't be easy for him to be appreciated by the celestial venerables, much less when he ascended to immortality to become a god. Xianger had planned to say something else, but a lightning bolt struck her in the back, causing her to faint and fall into the void. Without hesitation, our protagonist leaped after his beloved. But when he had her in his arms, the flower that looked like a soul stone shattered into two pieces, with one half placed on our protagonist's wrist and the other on his beloved's wrist. As soon as that happened, Daoling could no longer hold on to Xianger and she slipped from his arms. Daoling lost his strength, but before he passed out completely, he could see his precious love getting farther and farther away. When our protagonist opened his eyes again, he was surprised to find himself in the arms of a lady with elf ears. He was even more surprised when he heard the feminine voice of another person asking if the baby was okay. Although the lady with elf ears told the other woman that the baby was fine, she also mentioned that there was an extraordinary energy within him that she had never seen before. Daoling wondered how he could have been in the underworld moments ago but now found himself in this place in the blink of an eye. He looked at his wrist and saw that the Supreme Soul Stone was now split in half. He realized that he had been reincarnated into another person along with one half of the Supreme Soul Stone. In that case, if he had reincarnated, his beloved Xianger must have also reincarnated in that world with the other half of the stone. The woman with the feminine voice asked the lady with elf ears to give her the baby so she could see him. The lady agreed and let her know that the baby did not cry, did not complain, and was full of energy. When the woman with the feminine voice held the baby in her arms, she noticed that Daoling had a strong mana fluctuation. But when Daoling looked at his mother in this life for the first time, he realized that not only was she beautiful, but her ears were nothing like those of humans. He also wondered why her breathing was so weak. It felt like she could die at any moment. When his mother let out a bad sigh, the lady with elf ears was frightened and immediately asked if she was okay. Our protagonist was also scared because his life force was rapidly running out. Without hesitation, Daeling gave his remaining spiritual power to his mother since it was a remnant of his past life that would eventually shoot up, so he could leave it to his mother to keep her alive for a few more years, then eradicate her nasty disease completely when he started cultivating again. Daeling was startled when two men suddenly burst into the room, shouting the name of who appeared to be their mother. As they urged Zioya, Daeling's mother, to wake up, the lady with elf ears, who was the midwife, informed the two men that Zioya had fainted. Zioya seemed more than fine and, with a smile, she told what appeared to be her husband that she couldn't understand how he, being the Sword Saint, one of the 4 famous generals of the Sacred Continent, could panic like a little child so quickly. As soon as she finished saying that, Daeling was quite annoyed because his father, a strong man, had let his mother give birth to 5 children in a row. The other gentleman, who was Zioya's father, thanked him for adding a new grandson to the dragon blood family tree, which was more than amazing. Zioya blushed and told him that was very kind of him. With that cleared up, Daeling's parents began to observe their newborn son. His father said the baby seemed weaker than his other children and because of that, there could be a future where he wouldn't be fit to become a general. To which his mother responded that the mana Daeling emanated was exceptionally powerful, so he would have a great future as a great mage. His father and grandfather were thrilled by the news. His grandfather went on a monologue where he let it be known that the dragon blood family was responsible for 2 legions of dragons and griffins, and they had been defending the border for many years, and although they had never lost even in hundreds of battles, they had always relied only on strategy and martial arts skills. So if they could have a valuable mage on the borders of their kingdom, they would be one of the most stable kingdoms they had ever had, since all 5 great families had cultivated mages in recent years, and that was what worried him the most, so now that they had their own mage in the family, everything was going to change. There would be no one to call them a reckless family behind their backs anymore. Daeling's mother asked his grandfather not to worry since she had observed that her son's initial mana was much stronger than that of any elf of his race and she was very sure that her baby would grow up to become the strongest mage in the entire kingdom. After having listened to the entire conversation, Daeling felt under a lot of pressure because of them, but since they had a very high opinion of him, he simply wasn't going to hide his talent, so he would have to accelerate his cultivation and thanks to the fact that the road to the underworld couldn't kill him, he was going to look for his beloved very soon. 100 days later, Daeling understood that the world he was in did not have the concept of cultivation, let alone the Taoist art, and that instead, that world was a world of magic and swords based on mana and fighting spirit. He also understood that there were many races, such as elves, dwarves, humans, specters, and that these different races competed with each other for stability and power. Among all these races, humans were the ones who overflowed with strength, and thanks to that, they dominated that world. The kingdom where Daeling was currently located was the Kingdom of the Storm, which had a total of 39 provinces, and although the Kingdom of the Storm seemed quite large and presented itself normally everywhere enjoying peace and prosperity, as well as dancing and singing to exalt the good times, they were surrounded by enemies. The Kingdom of Kot to the east, the Bandits of the Sand to the west, the Kingdom of Wana to the south, and the Alliance of the 4 Lords of the North were not at all friendly to the Kingdom of the Storm. That was the information Daeling had managed to gather in the 100 days he had been alive. He was still a precious baby, and the kingdom adored him. Most of all, the women of the court. They had a tendency to pinch Daeling's cheeks several times a day, and his christening day was no exception. While Daeling begged in his head for all those ladies to get off him, as he waited in the royal crib, his father was very pleased that his son was quite friendly and handsome, even his mother agreed. The ladies who had finally let go of Daeling's face made it known that the 100-day banquet, that is, his christening, would be quite grand as they had heard that even Bishop Sass himself would baptize him as he would be attending personally. Having said that, she also asked our protagonist's father if she could have the honor of being the first person to know the baby's name. Because yes, they had not yet given him a name. Daeling was surprised to hear the word name as he did have one, but no one knew it. Even so, his mother took him out of the royal crib to hold him and told the cheek-grabbing woman that Sass had learned that Daeling had been born with a great amount of mana, and that was why he had insisted on baptizing him personally. His father, on the other hand, replied that as for the name, he could not reveal it yet, but he would announce it later in front of all the guests at the christening. Our protagonist wanted to know where his father had gotten that crazy confidence to choose his name. We could say he was scared, too. Apparently, Zioya felt her son's nerves as she clarified that surely his father would give him a good name that was not inferior to those of his older siblings, so he had to behave very well at his christening. Having said that, Zioya began to carry her son down the royal stairs, placing him in another, more elaborate, royal crib. She warned her son that the ceremony was about to begin, so Daeling had to stay there for a few minutes. Daeling thought the idea was great as it was quiet there. He reproached his mother and his head for not putting him there from the beginning. With that, Daeling set out to quietly practice his supreme kung fu. While doing so, Daeling was certain that in the world he was in, there were no Taoist arts, but that even so, the aura was unusually more abundant. He also discovered that the Taoist aura he was cultivating and the mana of that world had some similarities. He added that his cultivation could progress 5 times faster compared to his past life, and at that rate, he should be able to achieve something in less than 20 years. Before he could think of anything else, a female voice interrupted his concentration. As she lifted him into the air and wondered if he was the blessed child of Mana, Daeling complained about being interrupted again. The woman, who was quite beautiful, told Daeling that although he didn't look as rough as his father, he was as handsome as his grandmother. She then stopped lifting him and finally hugged and kissed him. It was revealed that she was Daeling's aunt after a few monologues from her. Our protagonist became even more excited when he learned that his aunt was the queen, and the man who told him that boys should be as strong as General Doll instead of handsome was his uncle, the king. The king was pleased that his nephew carried incredible mana and was excited that he would become an excellent mage in the future. Daeling thought that his uncle was a beautiful flower on top of cow dung. That is, pretty good at being surrounded by pure piranhas. On the other hand, his uncle thanked his mother for giving birth to another talent for the Storm Kingdom, and that the powerful royal elf bloodline of his mother's mother, in addition to the mana, had continued in the Storm Kingdom. Zioya approached to say that the bond between the elves and the Storm Kingdom was completely unbreakable. Before she could say anything else, someone called out to the king. It was a rather ugly woman who informed the king that the bishop of the Church of Light had arrived and that the baptism would have to begin soon. Daeling's aunt told the ugly woman, who was Princess Stoneheart, that as a concubine she was not qualified to walk on the baptismal platform, to which the bishop responded with too much arrogance that the princess had gone up on the baptismal platform as his baptismal assistant, so she should not interfere in that matter. Daeling did not find that pleasant, as in his little head that guy was relying too much on his title as Bishop of the Church of Light, and precisely for that reason he was behaving like an idiot due to the enormous strength that the Church of Light emanated in the kingdom. Daeling didn't understand how he dared to challenge the queen's authority at will. Princess Stoneheart asked the queen for the baby to begin the baptism, but Daeling did not like the idea at all because he thought it was quite detestable to intimidate his family in that way. So when the queen handed him over, Princess Stoneheart screamed when she saw that our protagonist was easily peeing on her. While Daeling peed on the princess, the genius passed through his head that he had done. Although he couldn't afford to mess with the disgusting bishop, he could teach the arrogant princess a lesson. The king, quite annoyed by the princess's screams, pointed out that it was disrespectful to shout there, that she was not suitable to continue with the ceremony because of her dirty clothes, and asked her to step down from the platform. The princess accepted quite angrily and gave the child to the bishop. Once in his arms, the bishop whispered to Daeling that he was quite interesting for provoking the Hart family at such a young age. He also told him that his mana was really special. Not only was it abundant, but it was also a bit different. To Daeling's discomfort, Sass warned him that he would be closely watching him. As he spoke, Daeling realized that Sass was testing his mana. He was surprised by this, as not even his mother, an elf, had realized his power. But his unique Taoist spiritual power had been discovered by Sass. Daeling knew that if this matter were to come to light, it could cause a lot of problems, not to mention that the Hart family would be even more at odds with his own family. Daeling resigned himself to the fact that he had to be more careful to hide his power well before it became strong enough. Once baptized, Sass announced to Daeling's parents that the baptism ceremony had been completed. He asked our protagonist's father to please give his name once and for all. In his father's arms, with excitement, he lifted him up and declared that the mark of their dragon blood family was deeply integrated into his son's bloodline. Therefore, from that moment on, his son's name would be Clay Dragon Blood. The crowd cheered wildly as Daeling, or rather, Clay, assimilated his new name in this life. 3 years later, Zioya was yelling at her son to stop running in the palace halls and hurry back, as his aunt was waiting for him. Clay, now a little boy, ran faster, shouting to his mother to let him go because it was his birthday and his aunt wouldn't care if he wasn't on time. His mother yelled back that he was a naughty boy and if his father found out, his little butt would be in trouble again. Clay, hiding quietly among the bushes so his mother wouldn't find him, thought that freedom was more important than punishment, so when he couldn't see his mother anymore, he ran away. He hadn't gone far when he heard someone crying for forgiveness. Clay approached the source of the voices and heard 3 young male voices laughing and shouting that what kind of princesses were they? They were just hybrids born to a common maid. Clay finally saw who was yelling at the girls, and it turned out to be 2 slightly dirty girls who had been playing in the mud. The boys continued to mock them, saying that the more they looked at them, the more they felt that the palace rats were better than them. They added that they didn't understand how they could stay in the palace if they had such lowly blood. A particular blonde boy, who had a crown on his head, started telling one of the girls that if she wanted to be let go, she had to eat a rotten herb, mud, and then say thank you to the fifth prince for the delicious meal, and acknowledge that they were his eternal servants. If they didn't do that, he would beat them to death. Clay decided to intervene, shouting at them for daring to intimidate people in broad daylight and warning them to leave before he lost his temper. The blonde boy with the crown, annoyed, asked him who he was, and after looking at him for a few seconds, realized that he was from the dragon blood family. Nevertheless, he retorted that royal family matters were none of his concern. Our little protagonist made it clear that matters concerning the yellow and blue family were indeed his concern, and he wouldn't allow them to continue intimidating the girls. One of the blonde boy's accomplices reminded him that Clay had mana, to which the blonde boy replied that Clay was only 3 years old and would only be good at controlling things like throwing rocks or small objects. Ignoring his companion, the blonde boy told Clay that for the sake of his entire family, as a dog for his family for so many years, he wouldn't beat him up, so if he understood that, he could leave. To the fifth prince's annoyance, Clay was completely ignoring him as he was helping to lift the 2 girls off the ground. The fifth prince then grabbed Clay by his shirt and lifted him up to shout at him for daring to ignore him. From there, the fifth prince decided to give him his best punch to teach him a lesson. Unfortunately for him, Clay easily avoided the blow, expressing his relief that he hadn't neglected his physical training. This was a challenge for the fifth prince, so he shouted at Clay not to dare challenge him just because the queen favored him, as he was the king's son, and even if he killed him today, his family, including the queen, wouldn't dare say a word. Once he said that, the fifth prince ordered his companions to teach Clay a lesson. Confident in himself, Clay encouraged them to come for him while he grew long green plants from the ground as he walked towards them, warning them that throwing rocks was not the only thing he could do with his mana. In the next scene, we can see the fifth prince's companions being quite scared of the giant green plants that Clay managed to summon with his magic. And that kind of magic was obviously high-level magic. The fifth prince's friends begged him to leave it at that, but the prince didn't want to. He was the prince, and even though Clay had the queen's protection, he was also the princess's son. The prince made it very clear to our protagonist that he was going to kill the 2 girls in front of him and encouraged him to show him what he could do against him while kicking the girls. Our protagonist, very angry, before unleashing his anger, asked them to stop hitting them or he would never be polite to them again, to which the prince laughed and told him that if he knelt down and begged him to stop hitting them, he could stop. One of his companions, on the other hand, told Clay that he didn't understand why he had to be so arrogant just because he had magic, so he was going to teach him a lesson. The other companion supported him, saying that he was going to see which was faster, their crossbows or his magic. As they aimed at him, the prince's first aide was thinking that he had heard the adults talk about how the dragon blood family was always in disagreement with his stone heart family. And since Clay appeared with his magic, everything was even more chaotic, so he was going to use the idea of protecting the prince to get rid of him and have his family praise him when they found out. It didn't even take 10 seconds when both companions fired the crossbows and the arrows flew out. Clay, seeing that the arrows were indeed meant to kill him, raised a protective wall while thinking that if he didn't kill the prince, there would be no end to his future troubles. But he still didn't want to be held responsible for causing trouble, as that could cause problems for his aunt and his family. Therefore, if he won too easily, unnecessary problems would arise, so he came to the conclusion that he had to get hurt a little to make it less problematic. When the arrows hit the magical wall that Clay had raised, he immediately invoked his Supreme Kai field and dispersed it. The prince's group thought they had hit their mark, but when Clay's field ended, they realized they had failed miserably. Our protagonist, showing himself as injured, said seriously that it was they who had started wanting to kill him. So he invoked his ability of the tree spirit, and the large, long plants that had come out of the ground quickly took hold of the prince and his team. While the prince's companions begged for mercy and swore never to attack our protagonist again, the prince only repeated that Clay couldn't do such a thing because he was the princess's son. Due to the screams, Zioya, who was still looking for her son, stopped her search and began to follow the screams. Clay, on the other hand, while one of the prince's accomplices asked what the hell he was doing, he was sharing his ideas, asking him not to worry because he wasn't going to use the dirty tricks they used on him because such attacks couldn't kill people, whereas his thunder palm could do that. His mother arrived just in time as Clay was invoking his power and cooking the prince's companion. Finally electrocuted, while Clay was collapsing as it was still very difficult for him to use the thunder palm and he was still too weak to use it more than once, he said that a crime deserved more than death. Clay's spiritual power was so depleted after using his thunder palm once that he immediately fainted when he fell to the ground. Hours later, Clay was semi-conscious, listening to his mother's voice asking him if he was okay or if anything hurt. When he finally opened his eyes and the first thing he saw was his mother, he immediately asked if he had fallen asleep. Zioya, quite worried, told him that he was injured and asked if he remembered what he had done before. As Clay slowly got out of bed, his mother, in addition to telling him that he had been a very naughty boy, let him know that without his knowledge he had already mastered the 3rd level instant magic, and although outsiders might still see him as a beginner, he had performed magic that could only have been done by a high-level mage. She also questioned him about where he had learned his poison vine magic ability, as he did not know how much effort she had to put in to get those children out of the vines in which Clay had wrapped them and how much she had to work to heal their wounds. Hey, before continuing, if you're enjoying this video, remember that you can subscribe, leave a like, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss your favorite content. Clay, a little upset, reminded Zioya that those children were bullies and he didn't understand why she had helped them heal their wounds. He also said that he had tried to kill the boy from the Stoneheart family who had been hit by the lightning. His mother told him that she had also tried to save him, but he had been cooked by the lightning. Clay, feeling a little guilty, asked if the boy had passed away and if his family was going to be in trouble because of it. Zioya asked him not to worry, although she knew that the Stoneheart princess was not willing to spare the life of her son, which is why she was still throwing a tantrum. Zioya explained to her son that he had accidentally hurt someone in self-defense, so he had a reason for doing it, although she made it very clear that he was too impulsive, which made her son ask if it was okay to go against the 5th prince. While waiting for her answer, Clay began to think that probably because of the situations of the 2 princesses, since they were very similar to the situations he had been in his past life, he couldn't have just taken a moment to look at things in a better way. His mother told him that he was a fool and that she would have scolded him if he hadn't saved those poor girls. Clay didn't understand, but he was happy with what his mother had said. Nevertheless, Zioya allowed him to understand her concern by explaining that she was really worried that he could use high-level magic when he was only 3 years old, because being too outstanding would bring him unnecessary problems. She also let him know that the descendants of the Dragon Blood family never tended to follow customs, and that the 5th prince and the Stoneheart family were idiots who only used their power to intimidate others. But with the support of the Dragon Blood family and the entire elf race, Clay didn't have to fear anything. Clay accepted this, and while hugging his mother, he thought that he really felt very good to have a mother, because from what he remembered of his previous life, he was alone and too miserable. Only after meeting his master did he have someone to love, want, and care for, so he determined that in this life he must take good care of the love and affection of his loved ones. Moments later, Clay's father entered the room. Zioya asked him what the royal family had finally decided, to which he replied that they wouldn't hold Clay responsible on the condition that they seal his son's magical power. Zioya looked at her husband with a frown, and when he said that he had already accepted the deal, her temper flared up. She exclaimed that he was crazy and couldn't believe that he had agreed to seal their son's magic. She made it clear that she wouldn't allow it to happen. Her husband asked her to calm down and told her that the sealing ceremony would be conducted by the Archmage Carla, as that had been the decision of the parliament. Suddenly, Archmage Carla appeared behind Clay's father, greeting Zioya in a friendly manner. She, still angry, continued to say that Clay had saved lives and defended himself, so why should he be punished for that? She wouldn't accept such a thing, and if the king continued to insist, she would take Clay back to the elf race herself, as her son was a genius in the world of magic, able to use and perform high-level magic at the age of 3. She couldn't let him ruin his potential in that way. The Archmage tried to calm her down and explain that things weren't as she thought. In fact, it was also for Clay's own good. When she stopped talking, the Archmage took the opportunity to explain that she was right. Clay did have a magnificent magical talent, but with his current age and ability, it could be that he wouldn't be able to control his power well. If another similar incident occurred, it would be very difficult to stop it. That was why the Parliament had decided to temporarily seal part of Clay's magic. He added that the seal would gradually weaken and disappear completely as Clay's control over magic became stronger. Zioya still had doubts and demanded to know if the Archmage was really telling the truth. The Archmage swore that it was the truth, based on his many years of friendship with Dal, Clay's father. On the other hand, Clay thought that if he didn't agree with what Archmage Carla was saying at that moment, the royal family and the Stoneheart family would never let the matter go. And since his mana turned into spiritual power with his mastery of it, it would only be a matter of seconds to secretly break the seal. With the decision made, Clay took his mother's hand to get her attention. Once he had it, he accepted the seal. He let his mother know that she had taught him that a man must be responsible for his actions and deserved to be punished for his mistakes. Besides, his seal would only be for a few years, and those years would pass quickly. Archmage Carla congratulated Clay's words, letting him know that he didn't have to worry about anything since the sealing years wouldn't harm his magical foundation. He had to study hard, and in no time, he would become a great mage. Clay smiled and accepted. Hours later, his family and the Archmage had arrived at the Church of Light for the sealing ceremony. Once there, the Archmage made it clear to Clay that since they stepped on a part of the church, his parents couldn't accompany them. but he told him not to worry since that simple technique wouldn't cause him any discomfort. Clay accepted without any concern, and while Carla explained what they had to do, they arrived at the ceremony site. Carla explained to Clay that he had to lie down on the stone platform in front of them, and once he felt sleepy after the sealing ceremony began, he was going to sleep. Without hesitation, Clay did exactly what Carla explained, and as soon as he lay down on the stone platform, those in charge of the ceremony began with the sealing. Our protagonist found himself enjoying the knowledge of what they were doing, thinking that with the magical weaving network they were relying on, they would block his magical power, preventing him from exporting his power. He understood that Carla had not lied to him since that wouldn't really harm his magical foundation, and he could break that seal by himself in a few years with his strength. He was thinking that until it started to hurt. That's when Bishop Sass appeared, telling him that the previous seal had taken effect and that he couldn't move at that moment. Clay was scared to see him, wondering what the heck he was doing there. The bishop reminded him that he had injured the fifth prince, the son of the Stoneheart princess, and had killed a direct descendant of the Stoneheart family, and he was keeping an eye on him. With that, the bishop cast another sealing spell on Clay's body. In the next chapter, we have Clay complaining while trapped in a magical ball with chains, saying that Sass was really cruel and he wouldn't be trapped there if it weren't for Carla, who had fallen into Sass's hands. But even so, Clay tried to break the seal from the inside, saying that they couldn't kill him, not yet. Outside, in reality, Zioya was yelling at Carla while her son was in his bed, surrounded by the two girls he had helped and the king, telling him that it wasn't what he had promised, and because of him, her son wouldn't wake up. Carla asked Zioya to calm down since nobody wanted that to happen. The king, nervous about Zioya's temper, tried to calm her down by saying that her husband was already negotiating with the Stoneheart family, and soon they would definitely give them a satisfactory answer. On the other hand, the two girls that Clay had saved wondered to each other if he would be okay, to which the older sister, who answered, said that since Clay was very kind, he would definitely be safe, but all they could do for the moment was to pray sincerely for him. Things got pretty tense as the king slapped one of the girls, blaming both of them for his nephew's condition since if they hadn't saved him, none of that would have happened. While the remaining sister helped the other one up, the king shouted that if they wanted to blame someone for Clay's condition, they were more than free to blame the sisters. Zioya let him know that the matter had absolutely nothing to do with them, and she, a kind-hearted mother, would never harm an innocent person in her worst nightmares. While they were fighting, Clay managed to open his eyes by invoking his supreme spiritual ability so he could break the chains that bound him. Finally free, Zioya called her son, letting him know that she was there and to please open his eyes to look at her. When he did what she asked, she drew him into a careful hug. Clay, in her arms, was thinking that he could break the complete seal at once, but he was still too weak for that. His mother called Carla to ask her what was going on, to which Carla replied that she couldn't believe what she was seeing. She pointed out that Sass's seal was broken and asked Clay how he had done such a thing since he had never seen anything like it before. Clay thought he was foolish for not knowing anything about the supreme spiritual ability, but he lied to Carla saying that he didn't know how it had happened. But he was there now because a devout prayer had guided him through the paths of darkness, so it must have been the two princesses who had prayed for him and saved his life. After telling the Archmage that, Clay asked his uncle if he was going to punish his saviors, to which his uncle let him know that he wouldn't. Zioya, on the other hand, shouted at Carla to immediately undo Clay's seal, but he sighed and told her that he couldn't do it because that type of seal can only be broken from the inside by one's own mana. He also revealed that it was a miracle that Clay had reached that level since the crack he had made in the seal should have been enough to allow him to freely use third-level magic. As soon as he said that, Zioya lost her temper and ended up shouting several things at him. Carla asked her not to get angry and to think that maybe her mother, the Elf Queen, could have a solution to this problem. He was going to say something else, but Clay interrupted him asking his mom not to get mad at Carla since it wasn't her fault that things had ended up like they did. He told her that she should be happy because he was still alive, and as long as he was alive, a solution to the problem could always be found. His mother, with teary eyes, agreed with him and gave him a big hug. She then told him not to worry about anything because she would find a way to fix everything. She would make arrangements to take him to the elf race. The king was glad to hear that, so he told his nephew that he was very proud of him for his generosity and asked him to name any reward or compensation he would want for such generosity. He could name anything and the king would grant it to him. Clay, still in his mother's embrace, took that opportunity to tell her that he wanted her to give preferential treatment to the two princesses who had worked so hard to save him and allow them to learn from Archmage Carla. The king accepted this wish without objection, adding that he would make them princesses of the kingdom and that everything would be done as he wanted. The princesses began, in tears, to thank Clay. Several days later, the mother of our little protagonist had managed to arrange everything for his expedition to the elf race, something that Clay was happy to have obtained the opportunity to explore the world and would have gone crazy staying in one place all the time. As he stretched before getting into his royal carriage, the two princesses began shouting his name. Clay turned around and was happy to see them, asking if they were coming to say goodbye to him. The princesses, tired from running, one of them spoke through pants, thanking him for saving them so many times and letting him know that no one had ever been so kind to them. Clay replied that there was no problem, but as he said that, the princess searched her bag until she found what she wanted to give to our protagonist. Clay was excited to see the gift, and as the little bird perched on his shoulder, the princess explained that the day Clay first met them, they had offended the prince just to save him, and ever since Clay saved them, she believed the eagle should be his companion. The princess also told him that she hoped the eagle would take their place to accompany him on his long journey. Our little protagonist loved his gift and let the princesses know that he would take good care of it. In addition, he added that his name would be Radar. Then, he didn't expect the older princess to leave a kiss on his cheek and tell him to make sure he came back safe and sound. Clay assured her that not only would he return that way, but he would also come back quite strong. Having said that, he went to get into his royal carriage. Once there, the carriage started moving, and his father, who had observed that scene, called him a brat, and even though he was young, he was good at getting girlfriends. Clay, playing along, told him that it was because he had taught him well, and since he married a beautiful woman like his mother, he couldn't lose. Zioya, on the other hand, was burning with anger because, in her opinion, those two were becoming more and more unbearable. She asked them to talk less because since the accident, Clay's grandfather had been sitting without saying a word. Zioya said she felt like her father was troubled inside, and it would be better if they talked to him. Clay, looking at his grandfather, thought he didn't understand how his grandfather could appear troubled to his mother since his body clearly emitted a thick and vigorous killing aura. As soon as they left the city, his grandfather spoke, asking if they had already left. Clay still feared that his grandfather was thinking about how to deal with the Heart of Stone family. Although, obviously, Clay's thought was accurate as his grandfather ordered a guard named Joe to return to the city and not come back until all those disgusting people were dead. Joe, on his horse, accepted the order and left the formation to return to the city. Zioya's husband questioned her, asking what she thought she was doing and if she wasn't thinking of making a move against the Heart of Stone family. Zioya reminded him that they had a blood alliance with the great families and that was why they could not kill each other. Even if they left the city, they would be found guilty after an investigation. Zioya's father replied that the rules of the Blood Alliance stated that they could not kill each other, which only included family members, but did not include concubines and illegitimate children that the Heart of Stone Archbishop kept outside his family. Besides, a blood debt had to be paid with blood, and they were the ones who had indiscriminately tried to kill his grandson in the first place, so if they didn't return the favor, he didn't understand how his dragon blood family could make a place for themselves on that continent, and that was not to mention that it was what the king wanted, so he would never involve the dragon blood family. Meanwhile, in the king's castle, we find the king himself inhaling the scent of the Heart of Stone family's blood, as he was more than sure that Zioya's father was working pretty quickly. The king murmured that the archbishop had been suppressing him for a long time, and now it was time for him to teach him some lessons, as he should really thank Clay of the dragon blood family for that opportunity. In the next chapter, our protagonist shows us how he holds his small eagle in his hands and asks it not to be afraid, assuring it that it won't hurt because it's just a little bit of magic. Clay covered his eagle's eyes and cast the soul-binding spell on his bird, and once ready, he made it fly. His grandfather, seeing this spectacle, asked his grandson what he had done to his bird, to which he responded with laughter that it had just been a little experiment. He even believed that if he had the seal, he couldn't just sit around waiting for his death, so if it was alchemy, then third-level magic should be more than enough for him. His grandfather agreed that he was right, but also expressed that becoming an alchemist wasn't as easy as he thought. He could have said more, but the crystal ball his grandson had given him showed a view from several kilometers away, so he asked how he had done such a thing. His grandson, smiling, told him that he had connected the crystal ball with his eagle's eyes, so what appeared in that crystal ball was what Radar saw. He also said that he had tried some options that could quickly heal wounds, so that was also an introduction to alchemy. Clay thought that because his alchemy skills weren't terrible, he could also break Sass seal much earlier with it. His grandfather quickly embraced his grandson and congratulated him for being truly the treasure of the dragonologists, meaning a treasure of their family and of alchemists. His father, upon hearing everything his son had done, pointed out that his skills must have been inherited from his grandmother since, after all, among the elves, no one can compare to her when it comes to alchemy and the creation of magical objects. His grandfather, excitedly, exclaimed that it was all a surprise since they had requested a genius mage, but now they had a genius of alchemy. Seconds later, Clay warned his grandfather and father to quickly stop the convoy as it seemed that something powerful was fighting a few kilometers ahead of them. When his mother observed the crystal ball that Clay was showing her, she said that there were many specters ahead of them in the forest of the elves, and judging by the magnitude of the magic seen in the ball, the beasts that must be fighting were at least level 7, and that they would undoubtedly get involved in unnecessary trouble if they went there. After that, Clay received a kiss on his forehead from her, saying that thanks to his cunning, they had avoided casualties. Zioya let them know that there was a small village a few more kilometers ahead, so they would spend the night there and restock. While the order was obeyed, Clay thought that yes, his mother had been right about camping, but she had been mistaken about the level of the beasts. They were not level 7, and he could tell that because his primordial spirit was constantly being thrown into the air due to the strong killing intent, letting him know that those two beasts that were battling were the terrifying existence of level 9. Clay had not been excited for a long time, so he had to go check out that battle. Therefore, when it got dark, he took advantage of the opportunity. They had already settled in the village, so when night came and everyone was asleep, Clay took advantage and escaped through the window, invoking an eternal golden lotus flower to descend quietly. As soon as he managed to get on it, he was surprised to see how small the platform of the flower was, and he complained internally that Sass's seal was a waste of time. As he left, Clay thought that the sleeping magic his mother had cast on him could last until dawn. But he was crossing his fingers that those two beasts could finish the battle before that time so that he would have plenty of time to return. As soon as he arrived at the scene, the fight was about to end. It was a battle between a Hydra, the Swamp King, a level 9 beast of medium rank. Its 9 heads corresponded to the 9 magical elements, and an Earth Bear, the King of Ground Combat, a high-rank level 9 beast. The Earth Bear had the elemental ability to have a condensed light armor in addition to the ability to awaken as a lion's roar bomb. Clay was behind the bushes, thinking that he would like to take advantage and collect the loot while both beasts were lost, but the battle power was quite terrifying, and even if they were at death's door, he was no match for them. Our little protagonist did not understand the fight, as the Earth Bear should be winning since in the beast catalog, it could clearly be seen that it could condense a light armor to defend itself, so he did not understand how the bear was letting itself be easily bitten by the Hydra. That meant only one thing, and that was that the bear had not been able to mature. Due to that, our protagonist decided to telepathically tell the bear if it wanted his help to not die from bites. That did not please the beast at all, as it replied that once it got rid of the giant Hydra, it would immediately eat Clay. Clay let him know that there was no need to be stubborn, since if they bit him twice in the wound he already had, he was more than done for. He also offered a deal: if the bear helped him defeat the Hydra, the bear had to become his familiar, and that he would have no loss anyway since he could keep his dignity as a specter and could hit Clay's ignorant face as many times as he wanted. The bear, quite upset, shouted that no one wanted to make a deal with him and that he was not going to lose to that beetle. But unfortunately for the bear, the Hydra managed to bite him again, making him hit the ground. Clay hurried him to make a decision since he was not going to last much longer, to which the bear ignored him, taking the Hydra's body by its tail, throwing it away. For nothing, since the Hydra managed to launch a good wave of fire at him. The tired bear decided to ask Clay if he could really help him. Clay told him that it was absolutely true, but he would have to swear since he could not trust the verbal promises of such a fluffy guy like the bear. The bear agreed, and as Clay proceeded to cast a spell on him, he said that he, Gage Pierre, Bear of the Earth, swore in the name of the goddess of the earth that if Clay could help him defeat that stupid Hydra, he would become his familiar and follow him always. Once Clay finished the spell, he told him that the deal was done and that he could expect his call. Pierre told him that if his promise didn't work, he would eat him first, even if he died. With that cleared up, the bear attacked the Hydra with force, and as the battle resumed, Clay was making sure they weren't going to eat him so easily, so he climbed onto his lotus platform, took a potion, poured it all over the bear's back, and called the bear stupid for not killing the Hydra with the King of Beasts' Howl Bomb, as if he didn't cut off all its heads at once, it wouldn't die. As soon as the bear felt the potion liquid on his body, he was surprised to feel his wounds healing at the speed of light, and his mana recovering quickly as well. Without waiting any longer, the bear went to the Hydra's face and, after insulting it, released the King of Beasts' Howl Bomb, thus cutting off all its heads at once. After the fight, the bear demanded to know what Clay had given him, to which Clay responded that it was just a little tonic because he had plenty of free time but few materials, and if it hadn't been like that, he would have made a bigger one. In addition, Clay demanded respect because he didn't know how he could dare to call him a brat. The bear was momentarily shocked but recovered, bowing to Clay and telling him that he would always be loyal to him. Our protagonist congratulated him, saying that he wasn't such a stupid bear, but the bear was annoyed that he called him stupid, so he reminded him that he was Gage Pierre and that was the only thing he would never compromise on, even if he died. Clay asked him excitedly what was wrong with calling him a stupid bear, to which Pierre, also excitedly, repeated that that was his name. Clay, after a moment, agreed, but even though it would be difficult to pronounce his name, he would call him Pippi. With that cleared up, Clay pointed out that it would be inconvenient for Pippi to follow him in that size, so he asked if he could make himself smaller. Pippi, with a smile, was able to make himself smaller, and Clay liked that. Once small, Clay tried to climb onto Pippi's lotus platform as it was soon going to be dawn, and they had to return quickly before his mother woke up. Unexpectedly for Clay, when he mounted Pippi in the small platform, it stopped levitating, sticking to the ground. Nervous, our protagonist called the bear stupid again, and told him that he was too heavy, and the bear replied that he wasn't heavy. The thing was that Clay's mana was too weak, and he didn't understand how he could have a master like him. Clay made the lotus disappear and then told the bear to grow big again and take him to the edge of the forest. Once they arrived there, he had to make himself small before entering the city, otherwise the bear would scare many people. Pippi understood, so she let the boy ride on her back. As they began to move, Clay noticed the crystal coming out of the Hydra's lifeless body and asked the bear what it was. Pippi responded that it was the monster core of the Hydra, and if a beast consumed it, their ability would increase drastically. Pippi regretted that the Hydra wasn't an earth type as their ability would have increased even more. She informed Clay that since he was her master, he would have to deal with the crystal. Clay liked that and told Pippi that her attitude as a familiar made him very happy. Clay also recognized that it was a good material for alchemy, but it was unfortunate that it was too big and flashy to take with them. In the end, they decided to leave it there momentarily and think of a way to acquire it later. Meanwhile, in the small village room where Zioya was, her screams were heard as she called for her son, not knowing where he had hidden himself now. Clay's father tried to calm Zioya down by telling her that he had ordered all his men under his command to find him. Zioya responded by saying that Clay had been sleeping with her, but she didn't even notice when he ran away, making her a bad mother. Clay appeared in the hallway, carrying his small bear and asking what had happened. Upon seeing their son, his parents were very happy. When he arrived at their feet, his father knelt down and asked if he had brought a dog. Clay clarified that it was actually a bear and lied, saying that he had heard its voice and went running to find it because the little friend had gotten lost in the forest. He reported that he had also signed a contract with the animal and asked if he could keep it. His mother agreed, as he, as a magician, could have his own contracted beast, but she also told him that he couldn't be running around like he did that day in the future. Having said that, she got up from the ground and apparently became dizzy, as her husband warned her that since she had been busy looking for their son since early in the morning, she needed to rest in the city for one more day, and they could also take care of acquiring some supplies. Zioya agreed, as the convoy really needed those supplies. Clay asked if they really needed to restock, as he didn't understand why since he didn't see the carriage carrying any kind of provisions on the way. He thought they would have to rely solely on local food. His parents laughed, and then his mother asked how so many people could go to the mountains without provisions, so she pointed to her own ring to tell him that all the provisions were in there. She explained that it was a special elf ring, and that it had enough space for an entire small city. The little boy began to think that the ring was more than a blessing, as with it he would have no problem retrieving the Hydra's corpse and its nucleus, and the lairs of these beasts were usually full of treasures, so he would really make a lot of money this time. Without hesitation, Clay asked his mother if a treasure found in nature could belong to the person who found it, to which his mother said it was true and asked why he was asking. Clay lied again, telling her that Radar had found the Hydra's corpse in the forest of the elves and he believed it was very valuable. His mother, surprised, asked if this was really true information, so her little son replied that if they had seen two beasts fighting yesterday, it was probably them, and he told his mother that the treasure should be his and asked her to retrieve it. Zioya congratulated him on such a wonderful discovery and understood why her little son had to confirm the owner before telling her. Looking back at her son, she told him that since the Hydra's body was too big, he obviously would need her ring, so she would lend it to him and help him if he shared half of his gain with her. Clay yelled that she was a very shrewd person and that it was clear that whoever found it would keep it. His mother stuck out his tongue at him and told him why he came to her for help if he was going to complain. Moments later, Clay was riding a horse with his mother and a bunch of soldiers behind them. Zioya shouted to her army that they were going to the forest of the elves, while her son thought she didn't know his mother was so interested in money. The army shouted in unison that they understood her orders. Zioya, hearing her son's grunts, asked if he was still angry with her and didn't understand why he needed so much wealth. Her son replied that as he wanted to be an alchemist, those treasures were his precious materials. The mother understood, but let him know that even with half of what they were going to earn, it was more than enough for him to use for a long time. Not to mention that in the future, if he needed help, his dragon blood family and even the elves would give him all the support he needed, so she asked him not to worry.